Hello, my name is Veronica and today I invite you into my home to tell you my story of recovery from addiction and how that process kept my hopes and my dreams alive. But before we go there, I'd like to tell you just a few things about myself. Through an interesting chain of events, after being absent from the education system for over 29 years, I became a full-time college student. And at the age of 47, I graduated from Chattanooga State Community College with an Associate of Science. At graduation, I received the award Summa Cum Laude for maintaining a 4.0 GPA for my entire degree. I also received the Excellence Award from the Social and Behavior Science Department. Psychology was my major, and was inducted in the Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. Now, another thing that I would like you to know about me is that over the course of the last 18 years, I wrote and designed a participating book series for people who are hurting, hard-headed, or too busy in life. That's either physically or mentally. The series invites you to co-write the daily meditations that creatively promote better thinking in a journal form. The end result is that each person accomplishes a one-of-a-kind book series of their very own. Now, the last thing that I would like you to know about me is that I am an advocate for recovering from any issue that limits a human being from living their life. For over 26 years, I have been a recovering person. And what does that mean exactly? Well, that means that for over 26 years, I've actively participated in a program of recovery. For me, that happens to be a 12-step program where I am clean and sober, I attend meetings, I have a sponsor, I sponsor other people, I work these things we call the 12 steps, and I give back what was given to me. Now, one result of that program was early in my recovery, in my personal life, it became paramount for me to take action to connect with people from all walks of life who struggled, which is one of the reasons why I'm telling my story, because all people struggle. So now I've told you a little about myself. As we move towards me telling you my story, I'd like to say this, that everybody gets impacted by addiction in some way because addictions impact society as a whole. However, we have learned that a person's recovery impacts society as a whole. So whether you have some type of an addiction yourself or are affected by somebody else's, I would like to bring to mind that these circumstances do not change the fact that you have the power to turn your situation into a positive experience. So today, I would like you to remember one thing from my story, or one idea, and that is that no matter what comes down the pike in your life, and no matter how bad something may seem to be, that as long as you're still breathing, that you or any person can still choose a road of recovery. But what I'm not saying by any means is that that road will be an easy one, as you are about to hear from my story of recovery. So with that, let's begin. I was born February 22nd, 1965, in a mental institution. I was taken from my mother, and I spent the first 2 years of my life with my Uncle Dominic and my Aunt Marge in Baltimore, Maryland, and they loved me very, very much. At the age of 2, my father requested my return home to Philadelphia, and they reluctantly gave me back to a family that was in turmoil. Now, before I tell you about my family, I'd like to say this. that as far as I know, we do not get to choose who we're born to or where we're born. So my family is my family. I love them. I do not love what was done to me. In my family, I was beat, mentally tortured, and molested by one of my older brothers. Now, when I say that I was beat, I mean that I was beat with a cord with knots in it. My brothers and sisters, they were beat as well, but I was beat more so because I did things like I told the neighbors and anybody who would listen what was going on inside my house, and that did not go over well with my mother. So often, along with being beat, I wasn't allowed off the front steps. And you would be surprised at what a small child could learn from having to observe life from a city step. Now, when I say that I was mentally tortured, I'll give you just one mild example. Often as a child, I was hungry, and one day I woke up and I heard the dog underneath the bed eating something. And I looked under there and he was eating dog biscuits. So I crawled under the bed and decided he was going to share his dog biscuits with me, and we were playing. My brother and my sister came in, they looked under the bed and they started laughing. It was funny. We were just being kids. And they meant no harm when they called out to my mother. And my mom, who had mental illness, she took it to a whole other level. She summoned me harshly downstairs, and I was trembling as I was walking to her. And in front of all my brothers and sisters, she commanded me to get down on my hands and knees and crawl around and act like a dog. Then she made me crawl into the kitchen and drink out of the dog's water bowl as she opened up a can of dog food, put it in the dish, and forced me to eat it. It was disgusting. I cried and I pleaded, and it fell on deaf ears. But these were everyday events in my home. Now, if you would just imagine a small child, about 5 years old, that's how old I was when I first started drinking. My mother used to give me alcohol and take me to bars with her while my brothers and sisters were at school. Now, what I remember most about drinking at this early age was the first time that I quit. I had gone down to the corner bar with my mother. They wouldn't let me in, and I was standing outside, and I started to spin. I leaned into the corner, and it stunk horrible like urine, and I started to vomit. I vomited so hard until nothing came out except this horrible sound. That scared me. So I wouldn't drink again until I was about 12 years old. Now, I believe that it was the 2 years of love that my aunt and my uncle gave me that was to carry me through all the trauma that was to come, all the way up through today. Even though I don't remember it. But by no means was I an angel. At a very early age, I started stealing. And the first thing I can recall stealing was a stick of pepperoni. I was hungry. I was in the grocery store. I put it in my coat, and I shared it with my brothers and sisters outside. From then, I just remember I started stealing food, and I got caught at the corner store. And the lady took the items from me, and she hollered at me, and she said, "My husband and I work very hard for the things that we have, and stealing is wrong. And now don't you come in this store anymore." So I wouldn't steal again until I was around 12 years old. Now, around the age of 12, my parents had divorced, and we lived with my father, and he was a truck driver, so he was never home. Our home became the after-school party house where everybody was drinking, so I just joined in and did what everybody was doing. Around the age of 13, I paid my first consequence when I broke up with my boyfriend, and his brother invited me up to their house for a beer party, and I went up, and I was a show-off when I drank, and I drank way too much, and I couldn't take care of myself, and the ex-boyfriend showed up, and he dragged me into one of the back rooms and raped me. Now, the next day, I felt so bad about what happened that I swore nobody would ever take advantage of me like this again. There was like nobody for me to talk to that I was close enough. And During this time, I was still having to deal with my older brother sexually harassing me, and by this time I had learned to wrap myself in blankets so that he couldn't touch me. Well, after this situation happened, the next time that my brother came into my room, I stood up and I screamed at him to get out. And I screamed so loud that I woke my father up, and the cat was out of the bag. Now, from here, I was pretty much my own guidance. And I continued to drink and do drugs, but I also had started to write. And I used to write and put my writings in these boxes. My father had an in-house bar, and I used to collect his liquor boxes, and inside of them I would put all the things that I wrote. And I called them, I was a teenager, I called them my liquor box albums. But I was music illiterate, so there were no notes. It was just my pain on paper, and it helped me. Now, I continued to write, and in high school I wrote this skit to a mime, and my theater arts teacher was so impacted by it that she asked me to perform it before the high school in the evening. Now, the skit was set to the song Teenage Wasteland by the rock band The Who. And in this skit, the girl is distraught because her boyfriend breaks up with her, and she is in so much pain she goes on a road of destruction to kill the pain with drugs. She starts off by drinking alcohol, smoking pot. That doesn't kill the pain, so she takes pills, she snorts lines. That doesn't kill the pain, and she's extremely upset, and she decides to shoot drugs. She goes into a death spin to the music and collapses to the ground, and at that moment the boyfriend comes back with flowers to make up with her, and he's knocking on the door. As she's reaching for the doorknob, she dies. Ironically, that skit foreshadowed the destructive road that was coming. It was shortly after that that I met Bernie, and Bernie and I fell in love at first sight. I was his world, he was my world. We came from similar backgrounds when we locked onto each other. After we were together like a little over a month or so, he told me that he was a drunk, a junkie, and a thief, and that he was no good for me. And I should have walked away, but I wasn't going anywhere. I already had fallen for him. So at the age of 16, I got pregnant, I quit school, and at the age of 17, I had my daughter, who I loved very, very much, but that love was not strong enough to stop a destructive road. So at the age of 17, I went from doing absolutely nothing to becoming an IV drug user with Bernie. And then between the age of 17 and 19, I spun out of control. While my friends were graduating from high school, I was graduating to becoming a junkie. I had tracks up and down my arms. In the summer, I would wear long sleeves so that you couldn't see what was going on with me. Bernie and I had become partners in crime, leaving a trail of destruction behind us. We didn't pay any of our bills, so we got evicted from our apartment, and they kept all our possessions, including my liquor box albums, which that was the only thing that really meant anything to me, and they were gone. By the age of 19, I wound up in my first detox, and I wound up there because I went into withdrawal. I didn't have any money, so I came up with the plan, and the great plan was that I would drive out to Trenton, New Jersey by myself and rip off a drug dealer. I drive out there, I get the drugs in my hand, and this day, they were in tinfoil. That never happened any other time, but this day they were in tinfoil. I get the drugs, I hit the gas, and the drug dealer, he dives into the car, breaks my grip off the steering, and I smashed into the car in front of me. We wrestle for the drugs, and I eat them. The cops come, but I wound up in detox because my body couldn't digest the tinfoil. 2 days in that detox, I get in touch with Bernie, and he has money, so I leave the detox. Now, between the age of 19 and 25, addiction takes a really nasty turn. And it takes mine and Bernie's love, and it twists it, and it mangles it into a sick love that neither of us can get out of. And then it takes all my hopes and my dreams and everything that's good about me, and it chains it up deep inside. And the only thing that's left on the surface is the worst of my personality. I am now dark, I'm cruel, and I don't care about anything except getting high. I become everything that I never wanted to be. I now lie to people, I cheat people, I steal from people, and I become of a criminal mind that is dangerous to myself and to society. I take my daughter through this entire addiction with me, and she loves me no matter what I become. And I love her, but that love is not strong enough to break the chains that addiction has on me. I am so strung out that I can't get out of bed in the morning without drugs. I can't move or function in any way. I spend my whole day finding ways and means to get more drugs. In the end, I'm living life on the run because from the law and from withdrawal, because withdrawal is on my heels 24 hours a day. I have a list of warrants a mile long, and I'm wanted for crimes by the tri-state area. I couldn't stand how I was living, but I couldn't stop. But no matter how good or bad things are, life happens and things change. And it was a cold November day, 1990. I was walking on the side of the road, up to no good, in Chester County, Pennsylvania, with my daughter, and the police pulled over because I fit a description. I gave them a fake name, and they took me in for questioning. When they took me in, they had separated me and my daughter, and she started crying, and that pulled on them chains. And then they called the surrounding counties, and they came back in, and they told me that I was under arrest for crimes. And they let me see my daughter before they took me. And when she saw me, she had been crying, she ran to me, and I dropped to my knees, and I held her so tight, and I told her that I was so sorry for showing her this kind of a life, and to remember that I promised her that one day I would get us out of this, and today was that day, to hold on, and I would come back for her. And then I stood up, and I told the police my real name. And I gave them my sister's number so they could call to have my daughter picked up. But Child Services, they took my daughter, and the police took me off to jail. Now, that evening, while I was sitting in that cell, there was only one thing on my mind, and that was that withdrawal was on its way. But I figured I could hold it together long enough to get through my court with that judge, and he would release me on bail. So the next day, they take me in front of that judge, and I'm shaking, but I'm holding it together. And the judge, he starts to read off a long line of charges, and I realize I am not going home, and I have to do something because I'm about to get very, very sick. So I come up with the plan. And the great plan is that I'm going to fake a seizure in the courtroom. So I throw myself on the floor in front of everybody. I start shaking all over the place. The sheriffs turn me on my side, handcuff me, call an ambulance, and take me to the emergency room. Now, when they take a prisoner to the emergency room, they do not put you with regular people. They put me in this other room. And I was laying there in a hospital bed, and the doctor was behind like a glass type window. They had an IV hooked up to me, and they came out, and he said that they were going to give me something for the withdrawal, but they didn't tell me what it was. And I was laying there thinking, okay, everything's going to be all right. And then the doctor, he administered something into the IV, and he went back behind that glass window. And the next thing I know, this cold, burning pain started ripping through my body. I sat straight up in the bed and I screamed, "What kind of crazy stuff did you give me?" And just then, the sheriffs came running in to hold me down as I went into an extremely violent withdrawal. Now, back then, AIDS was an epidemic, and people were scared. Nobody knew who had it, and there were so many ways to get it, and biting was one of the ways. Well, this drug was eating all the drugs out of my body, and the pain was so horrendous that my body was cramping up, and my jaw was clenching down, and I turned, and my jaw was clenching, and the sheriff, he thought that I tried to bite him, and he hollered out, "She's trying to bite me," and that was it. They pushed me down so hard that I thought they were going to break my neck. They pushed so hard that they broke the heel right off of my boot, and then they 4-pointed me, which means they strapped down all my limbs so that I couldn't move. About a half hour later, I was so weak that I couldn't even move my fingers. They came in, they unstrapped me, put me in handcuffs, put me in a wheelchair, and took me back to jail. Now, the next day, they take me back to court. Now, when they take you from prison to court, they put you back in your street clothes, and my coat happened to have a belt on it. So they put me in a holding cell, and when they put me in this holding cell, I was really wanting to get high, and I had this strong urge inside of me to get out. So I came up with a plan, and the plan was that I would call the sheriff back to light my cigarette, and after he lit my cigarette and he turned to leave, I would take my belt and flip it up into the door jamb and just push the door open and walk right out of here. So I call the sheriff, he comes back, he lights my cigarette, and I flip my belt up into that door jamb perfectly. I push the door and my belt slides out. So now I'm really panicking and I really want to get high. So now I come up with another plan. I start looking at the walls and I start thinking about the construction of the building and the ductwork, that I can get into the ductwork. And then I notice in the bathroom that right above the toilet, there's a light, and the light fixture has a lip on it. Excuse me. So I climb up on the toilet. I take my belt and I wedge it up underneath the light, and I start pulling down really hard. All this sawdust is going all over me, but I can see up above the light, and it looks like some kind of hole that I can climb into. And then I hear the sheriff coming, so I jump down, and I act like I'm not doing anything. The sheriff takes me in front of the judge, that same judge. So now I'm standing there in front of this judge with my broken boot. My clothes are a mess. My hair, which I had a lot of, had not been brushed. And I'm sure that I had sawdust all over me. And that judge saw the very sick person that I was. He read my charges, and then he ordered me held to my court date and stipulated me to Eagleville Hospital Treatment Center. Now, while they were about to transport me, I came up with one more plan of escape. And now this plan was that even though my hands and feet were shackled to a belt that was around my waist, I believed that when we got outside, I could drop to the ground and roll underneath one of the vehicles and they wouldn't notice that I was gone, and then I could go get high. Well, when we got outside, I looked around and I noticed that there were about 7 sheriffs around me with guns. And even at that moment, as sick as I was, I had a moment of sanity. And I changed my mind. And I just got on that van and I went back to prison. Now, it was about 2 weeks later that they loaded me up in that van again, and they took me back, took me over to that treatment center. Now, they opened the door of the van, I get out, they close the door behind me, and they just left. They just left me standing there. And I was like, what? And the first thing that I thought was, I'm free, I can go get high. But there was another thought there that day. And I don't know if it was because I had 2 weeks without any chemicals in my body, but the thought was that I could walk through the doors right there. You see, I didn't know what was on the other side of them doors because I never made it through any facility that I had been in. But I knew what was in Philadelphia. I knew the horrors that were on the streets of Philadelphia waiting for me. And through the grace of God, I walked through them doors that day. And that facility showed me a care and a concern that was foreign to me. They processed me in, they gave me a room to share with another person. They gave me a voucher for clothes and shoes. They structured my day around breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They took me to meetings. They educated me about the disease of addiction that I had. They just wowed me. They gave me medical treatment, dental care, and they introduced me to this thing that they called therapy. Now, the one-on-one therapy, it was nice. I would sit there with another person, a counselor, and we would talk about problems and come to solutions. But group therapy, they would sit us all in a big circle, and there was over 60 of us. And a couple counselors would come in, and we would have discussions. But they also seemed like they would go around the room and pick somebody and pull them out of their shell. So I quickly learned that I would do everything they told me to do so I wouldn't have to be one of them people. Well, one day they come in the group and they start around the circle. And Sandy, who was one of the counselors, she was very street smart. And as they go around the circle, I used to sit there, okay, I have really long hair, and my hair would be down like this, and I would literally be looking at you through my hair. Well, I was watching them, and they go around and they stop at me. And Sandy says, Veronica, let's talk to Veronica. And I shook inside. And then she said, Veronica, I don't know where it happened, how it happened, or why it happened. But somewhere, somehow, somebody told you it wasn't okay to think. And when she said that, it was like a punch right to my stomach that knocked me straight back into childhood to being humiliated by my mother in front of all my brothers and sisters. And then she said, we decided that you were going, from now on, that you're going to wear your hair up and we're going to give you a voucher for dresses. And I thought, that's not that bad, I can do that. So I go back to my room and I put my hair up in a ponytail. And I realize when I go out around people that I can't hide behind my hair. And then I realize that you can see my expressions and I can see yours. And then I go and I get these dresses, and the dresses that I picked were very professional. And I had never had a real job, but when I put them on, they made me feel intelligent, smart, and they made me feel pretty. So the changes were having a positive effect on me, and when I went back to group, I was sitting up straighter and I was smiling. And the counselors come in, they start back around that circle, and they stop at me again. And Sandy proceeds to pull me the rest of the way out of the shell, and she says, "How you feeling, Veronica?" And I tell her the positive effect that the changes are having. And then she says, "Well, we decided that you will be this group's leader from today till the day you leave." And when she said that, I freaked out inside because I had a voice. I didn't know how to use it. I did not know how to be any kind of a leader. I didn't know how to be part of a team. I certainly didn't know how to pull somebody up on something in a constructive way, let alone be there for them when they were hurting or wanting to go use. But I did what they told me to do, and I flourished, and I started to find my voice. Well, no matter whether things are good or bad, life happens and things change. They call me into the office one day, and I immediately know something's wrong because there's a lot of staff members there, and Sandy walks over to me, she puts her hand on my shoulder, and she says, "Veronica, I want you to stay calm and just know that we are here for you." And they proceed to tell me that Bernie, the man that I love, my partner in crime, was found dead of a drug overdose laying in the streets of Philadelphia. And I just collapsed into a pool of sorrow. And they were there to pick me up, and they were there for me. They made all the arrangements for me to go to Bernie's funeral. And now, Bernie and I had burnt all the bridges back in our hometown. We weren't welcome anywhere, and both of us had a bad reputation. But I was going to go say my goodbyes to the man that I loved. So I pulled my hair back into that ponytail and I put that dress on. And I walked straight into that funeral home, straight to the casket. It just seemed like people moved out of my way. And as I stood there looking at Bernie, I knew that that would be the last time that I was going to see him, and I wanted to cherish and remember every moment. And I leaned down into the casket and I told him how sorry I was that we had gotten so mixed up with drugs, alcohol, crime, the whole thing. How sorry I was. And I told him how much I loved him. And then I promised him that I would stay clean and sober for the both of us. I kissed him, and then I went straight back to that rehab, and I finished that program. And on the last day there, I met with Sandy before I left, and I told her how scared I was because I knew that I was leaving all my support there. Even though I had aftercare plans to go live with one of my older brothers and go to meetings, I was still scared. And Sandy said, all you have to do is pick a program, go to meetings, and build a foundation of recovery, and you will be okay. Well, the day I left that facility, I entered into a transition. And that transition was, I had been introduced to all of this support on this side. And there was an abundance of support on this side. And then there was me in the middle, scared and standing alone. I was like a diamond in the rough. I didn't know who the hell I was. But I knew what I wanted. I just didn't have the trust in myself or the confidence that I could do it. But I did have the desire to want to live differently. And desire was all that I needed to start the process of recovery. So I went straight from that facility to a meeting in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I raised my hand high and I said, My name's Veronica. I'm a drug addict with a desire not to drink. And they said, welcome to Al-Anon. Ooh, I totally went to the wrong program. Al-Anon is for the families of alcoholics. And they were very kind. And after the meeting, they told me where a meeting was, a 12-step meeting that was a better fit for me. So the next day, my brother, he dropped me off at a meeting in Ben Salem, Pennsylvania, and it was at a house. And when I walked up and walked inside, it was a living room. It looked like a hangout. There were sofas and chairs around the perimeter of the room. I could smell coffee coming from the kitchen, and there was probably about 2 or 3 people there. So I just sat down. And within 15 minutes, that entire room was jam-packed with people. Every seat was filled, the floor was covered, all the way through the kitchen, out the front door, onto the porch. It wowed me how many people were in recovery. At break, I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and I was looking straight at the ground smoking. And this woman came up to me, and she said, "Hi, how you doing? My name's Dorothy. Are you new here?" And I said, yeah, my name's Veronica, and I just got out of rehab yesterday, and they told me to make meetings. And she said, yeah, that's what you need to do. You come to the meetings, we'll give you a meeting list, we'll give you a phone list, you get connected with us, and you keep coming back. And then I said, well, they also told me to get a sponsor. Will you sponsor me? And she started laughing, and she said, yes, I'll sponsor you. I didn't know what a sponsor was. I just know that's what the facility told me to do, so that's what I was going to do. So I started going to the meetings, but I got hit with obsession and I used. But after I used, I remembered that the people in that meeting told me to keep coming back no matter what. So that's what I did. I went back to the meeting and I told them that I used. And they asked me, they said, well, did you call your sponsor? I said, no. And they said, well, your sponsor is a guide through the steps, and you should want what they have. So it was several meetings later that I was at a meeting, and this woman walked in, and she had bleach blonde hair, hot pink spandex on, and she had her head up. And I was instantly attracted to her recovery. When she walked past me, she had a keychain with a whole bunch of key tags and coins on it that represented her clean time. And when she walked past me, they jingled. So at break, I went outside to talk to her. And now I have been talking to a lot of people on the phone, but I didn't know who anybody was. So we were talking, and she said, oh, what did you say your name was? I said, Veronica. And she said, Veronica, I've been talking to a Veronica on the phone. She said, it's me, Pam. And here we had already connected. So I asked her to sponsor me. She said yes, and she took me to her home. And it just so happened that at her home, there was a lot of recovering people that hung out there, and it was just what I needed. But I was still in this transition, and I was struggling. I was grieving Bernie's death, and I just hit this place inside where I just didn't want to be here anymore. And I decided that I would go to Philadelphia and buy them drugs, and I would join Bernie. And I went there, I did them drugs, I fell out in the street, and the junkies that were there, they took care of me until I came to. And then when I came to, I bought more of them drugs and I went home. The next day, it was a warm day in June, 1991. There was a knock on the door, and it was a fella that I had been in rehab with that liked me, and he was taking me to some meetings, and he stopped by to take me to a meeting. And I said, I'm just going to go take a shower, which I was lying. I was going in there to do them drugs. And this is where you learn that God has a plan, and you are not always in on it. Because I went into that bathroom, I did them drugs, I fell out, and at that precise moment, the phone rang. He answered the phone. It was my daughter needing to talk to me. And he said he was already suspicious of me. So he knocked on the door. And when I didn't answer, he broke the door down. And I was laying there dead with a needle hanging out of my arm. He panicked, and he called an addict who lived right down the street. And then he called the paramedics. both him and that addict tried to revive me. They said I wasn't breathing, I had no pulse, and my eyes were wide open. Now I will tell you that that day I did have an experience with my higher power that is very sacred to me, and I will never forget it. But that experience only reinforced that I had a road to walk here. The paramedics came, they gave me that drug that eats all the drugs out of your body. And as I was coming through, it was like coming up through a pool. As I saw everybody, the first thing that I said was, get the F out, I didn't use. And then the paramedics, they took me to the emergency room. And at the emergency room, the doctors, the nurses, the people there tried to talk to me, and I didn't want to hear anything. I signed myself out against medical advice. And I went back to my brother's apartment. Now, my brother lived 3 stories up, and I happened to be walking past an open window, and I heard that addict, who happened to have clean time. I overheard him pulling that guy up from the rehab, and he was saying to him that he was a newcomer and that he needed to be hanging out with the men so he could recover, not with the women, and to back off from his sister and let her recover. He called me sister, and that touched me because I didn't feel like anybody's sister. I felt like a piece of crap that couldn't get this and just kept messing everything up. And when that addict got done with that fella, he came up into my brother's living room and he got a hold of me and he said, Veronica, with the most sincere look on his face, he said, Veronica, I don't know if you realize it or not, but you died today. And it's a miracle that you are standing here. Not everybody gets a second chance. And I'm telling you that if you don't work with your sponsor, make more meetings, and surround yourself with us recovering people that you're going to use within the next 5 days, and you're going to be back out on the streets living them horrors. At that moment, for some reason, I connected. And I could see the unconditional love of one person helping another being extended to both the guy from the rehab and to me. And it was that unconditional love that God instills in all of us that reached deep down inside of me and broke every single chain that addiction had on me. And that unconditional love pushed me head on into full-blown recovery. From that point forward, I became willing to do anything and everything to become a recovering person. I began working with my sponsor. In fact, I moved in with my sponsor and I had recovering people around me 24 hours a day. I went to more meetings. I worked the steps. And through the grace of God and recovering people in the 12-step program, I was able to prioritize my life into 3 things. Staying clean and sober under any and all circumstances, talking about the stuff that was bothering me, and helping other people. The people in 12-step helped me to put Bernie into a perspective that I could pull strength from. I got my daughter back, I got a job, and I attained a commercial driver's license. The weeks turned to months, turned to years, and I met a wonderful man, got married, and we had a daughter. I developed strong ties with other recovering people, and I was able to recapture my hopes and dreams, and I started writing all kinds of stuff. So I had written this screenplay called Death Warrant, and my sponsor went with me to show it to somebody up in New York, and we took the train, and on the way up, we were going over some step work in one of my journals, and she noticed that I was putting all these little writings in there, and she read them, and she said, these are really good. You need to write a book. You need to put them into a book. So I took that suggestion, and I got a book, I put the writings in it, and I called it, I Didn't Ask to Think This Way, I Just Do. And as time started going on, I just had this well inside of me that wanted to connect with all people from all walks of life. So I self-published the book in my mother-in-law's living room with the help of some other recovering people. And then I founded and I hosted a televised recovery program for people from all walks of life who struggled. And that aired in the Bucks County area on the public access channel for over 3 years on a $100 a month budget. It was a wonderful experience. During this time, I was still writing, so I made a commitment to my higher power that when I was in my 50s, I would edit the books so that I could just live my life now. And that's what I did. I stayed in recovery and I lived my life. In 2006, my husband and I decided that we would move to Tennessee to finish raising our daughter. So when we got down to Tennessee, I got connected with the program. We started our trucking company, got our daughter into school, and everything was good. But no matter how good or bad things are, life happens and things change. In 2010, I was on a job site with my tractor trailer, and my dump trailer door swung backwards and it smashed my head against the side of the trailer. I had a hard hat on or else I would have been instantly killed. But I broke the bones in the left side of my face and split the bottom part of my face in half. The accident left me with 5 titanium plates in my face and brain damage. I lost a lot of my physical capabilities and I became disabled. And as a family, we lost our home, we lost our business, and we were left in financial ruin. But we held together tight. And no matter how bad things got, I was still breathing, and I held on to my recovery, and I stayed clean and sober. Now, just before my accident, I was scheduled to take my GED at our local community college. So even though I had all these physical disabilities, my brain was still working. It was just that my brain and my physical, they just weren't in sync. So I went and I took that test, and after I took that GED, I came up with a plan of recovery from my accident. And that plan was that I would design my own therapy. And that therapy was I would now become a full-time college student. So I got connected with the disabilities office there, and we worked to get the accommodations for all my injuries. I had issues with my hearing, I had issues with my eyesight, with my concentration, and they had programs for all of it. In between all my classes, I spent all my time in the disabilities office, and they had this soundproof room that I just about lived there. And during this time, my youngest daughter, who was 15, she tested in to the middle college that they had there at the college. And we got to go to college together for several semesters. Now, I graduated, and after I graduated, I went back to work. And in 2014, after my daughter had graduated, we went to visit a college in South Carolina. And we got hit head on by a car. My daughter was okay, but I regressed in my brain injuries. So I went back to school. And then in 2015, my daughter and I again were on our way to campus, and we got hit from behind. My daughter was okay, I regressed even further. So now I go into meeting and I'm very upset, I'm very distraught because this was not how I planned for my life to be. And I don't know what to do with myself. And someone comes up to me after the meeting and they talk to me and they say, I'm really sorry that all these things are happening to you, Veronica, but this is what I did when I was disabled. I got into little projects around the house and it helped me. And I say thank you. And I go home. And I don't want to get into little projects around the house. I'm angry. I want my life back. So I sit down on the floor of my little office and I write this letter to God. And I tell God how upset I am that this wasn't how I planned for things to be. I pour my heart out, I cry my eyes out, and then when I'm done, I take that letter and I put it up on my desk. And I take that suggestion because this is how I live my life, by letting other people help me. So now, it was several days later, as I was getting into little projects, I came across a box. And when I opened this box, it has all of my books in manuscript and the one that needs to be revised. And it overwhelms me. So I go to the meeting and I'm sharing how I wrote all these books, but I don't have the patience or the willingness to do all the edits and all the work. And there just so happened to be somebody in that meeting that I have a great deal of respect for in recovery. And they came up to me after the meeting to talk to me, and they said, all you have to do is start that first page and the rest will come to you. So I took that suggestion, I went home, and I started that first page, and that opened up the door for me to refocus on my heart's desire to connect with people from all walks of life. And then I remembered that when, all them years ago, I made that commitment to my higher power, that when I was 50, I would edit the books. And I was now 50. And now I actually had enough education that I could edit the books. And I had help from my youngest daughter. So I dove in. I thought about the other people who were troubled, and I revised book 1 with pictures of me communicating from bridges and roads in life. And then I split book 1 into 3 volumes, and I thought about all my years of recovery and the things that helped me each day, and I built them into a creative journal that all people could co-write. And then I split that book one more time when I remembered the people who were in the prisons and the rehabs. And I called it the 31-Day Packet Book. My daughter and I did all the photography, we edit the books, and then we published them and started the uphill road to get them into circulation. I realized that I was right on track with my higher power's plan for my life. I also realized how fortunate I am to be living a life recovering from addiction all these years, because not everybody gets that chance. And how grateful I am that I walked through them doors to that facility all them years ago instead of going to Philadelphia one more time to buy drugs. Because I don't believe that I would be here had I done that. And I am thankful that it was my higher power's plan that June 8th, 1991 would be my clean and sober date instead of engraved on my tombstone. Today, it is my hope that sharing my recovery story and my book series opens the door to recovery for any person with any issue. It is also my hope that they see that I am just an ordinary person, a recovering person. And if I can do it, they can too. As I end my story and my time here with you today, I'd like to say this: that we are all diamonds in the rough, being refined in some way. No matter what economic class we're from, no matter what gender, culture, race, or belief that we may hold, right now we are a human being. So whatever comes down the pike in life, no matter how bad it may be, you remember that as long as you're still breathing, that you or any person can still choose a road of recovery. Thank you very much for your time today, and I hope that you get something from my story that helps you in your walk.